Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop an episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we're so excited to have woodworker Ryan Lutz on the podcast. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Also, super impressive that you guys go through that whole spiel every episode. It's like all the episodes I listened to, it all sounded the same. So I thought it was just like a recording you drop into the beginning, but
we perfected the inflections to the point that you don't even have to look at it anymore.
That's awesome.
Rinse, repeat.
Thank you. Well, we are looking forward to discussing your creative journey, developing your notable style, balancing multiple income streams, and learn a little bit more about your experience with Art Residencies. But before we dive in, Ryan, we want to share a little bit more about your background with our listeners who may not yet be familiar with your work.
So, Ryan is a longtime skateboarder who is passionate about giving used skateboard decks a second life through his work. That is why he founded Dusted Woodworking, which is a multifaceted woodworking studio that specializes in using recycled skateboards. Colorful patterns and vibrant designs are trademark characteristics of his work. However, nothing is really off limits. He has largely acquired this woodworking expertise through self-education, supplemented by professional instruction at a number of craft schools, which we will go into. And his work has been featured in Green Hill Winter Exhibition, Peel Gallery, Retro Modern Furnishing, and the Pocosin Arts Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
this is super awesome.
Yeah, that's a very formal introduction for our listeners, Ryan. But how would you describe your work to someone who hasn't seen it before?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of tough because it's been evolving so much, especially over the past year. Um, like you mentioned, I did a lot of and still do some work with recycled skateboards, but that medium is really what brought me into woodworking originally. But as of lately, I've really just been moving into more like hardwood furniture and things of that nature. So kind of like moving away from using skateboards as a medium, but still doing similar projects when it comes to woodworking. Um, but yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that was way better than the sentence that I sent in to answer your question from the form.
The submitted bio was, I am a woodworker.
That was great. Yeah, I am a woodworker from Raleigh. That was about it.
Yeah, but then you have the skateboard part. I mean, that's super awesome, Ryan. And that leads perfectly into the next question. It's like, how did the idea of creating your style of work and turning it into a business with skateboards? Like, we want to know, when did this turn into like a business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, like I've always been on the art side of things. Like growing up, high school, I was always in, the AP art classes and like, in the art club, and I was just like an art kid all through those years. Mainly like 2D stuff. But at the same time, I've skateboarded for the majority of my life, and um, kind of what comes along with that is trying to build your own ramps, build your own obstacles, that kind of thing. So, um, growing up, my dad was always really handy, and the type of dad that can just fix anything in the house, like just knows how to do everything, like that kind of guy. And so when it came to asking him to build me skate ramps, like he would figure it out. And so he would, build like these mini skate parks in my yard, and I would always want to help him out with it. So, always had a passion for building stuff when it came to building skateboard ramps. And so kind of like combine that with the art side of things. I would say like post college, I really got into woodworking. And a lot of that was just inspired through YouTube, like seeing some folks online repurposed skateboard decks was really inspiring. Um, and like a lot of people that skateboard, they, we kind of hoard all of our old broken boards or like boards that are like almost beaten to death, but like might still have a little bit of life in it. Like you never know. So I had, a couple in the garage at my parents' house and got those out and started making small things, like little earrings or like bottle openers or whatever. And so that's kind of like where the recycled skateboard as a medium came from. And then as I started making those things at the time, I still had an art Instagram, or I had an art Instagram for like my high school art endeavors. And like even in college, I would do some like 2D stuff and mainly just like paintings for friends or whatever. I think most of those pictures are archived at this point on the Instagram. But yeah, so I was already like in the mindset if I make something, I'm gonna share it. And then when you do that, I had some people reach out saying like, oh, I want to buy some earrings, whatever, and that really just spiraled into slowly, making a business out of it. It's like, you start by selling one pair of earrings and then somebody else wants something. And then somebody's like, could you make a cutting board? Or like, you want to make a cutting board yourself? Because like, that's the natural gateway drug for woodworkers. It's like, I'm going to try to make something. And like, the first project is typically a cutting board. Um, but yeah, that's, I guess like to circle back to your actual question, like that's how I got into the recycled skateboards as a medium was just like being a skateboarder most of my life and just like getting inspired by seeing other people's work.
And having some of the materials ready to experiment with. I guess, and that probably took some of the pressure off, not like you went to a, specialty wood store and bought all the fancy, colored woods. And then you're like, yeah, but that tiny piece cost me $40. At least you already had stuff that was like colorful and ready to go.
Yeah, definitely. And like that's always the idea, or that's what the idea was using skateboards as a material. It's like this is free material, but I can easily source it from friends or local skate shops that will save the boards that people drop off when they come in for a new one. Um, so like in theory it is, like a free resource, free materials, but like the amount of effort it is to convert or like to process a broken skateboard into like usable material and just the trials and tribulations of that, super difficult and not practical by any means. But I mean it's definitely just like a labor of love at the end of the day. Is like, I wanted to make things using these skateboards, like using something that I'm already passionate about. And yeah, it was like convenient that I could just pick some up from the skate shops or like had friends that had some in the garage too. But tough thing to scale because at the end of the day, you need like hundreds and hundreds of skateboard decks to make things, at like an actual production business level.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm
That's cool.
curious too with that scalability aspect, pivoting to taking your business full time. Like, was that obviously that's a thing to consider? And I know, spoiler of your style has also expanded beyond like just using the skateboards. It also incorporates other types of wood in some of your other pieces. So how did that factor in when you were pivoting to taking your business full time?
Honestly, it didn't. At that point, I like I was not thinking very critically about that.
You're like, we'll just figure it out. It'll be
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. It was kind of just like I'm gonna jump off this cliff and see what happens kind of deal. Like
Heck
there's
yeah.
not a lot of forethought in it. I guess like to give some background on that, like I don't have necessarily like an art background. I went to school for business and like didn't really know what I wanted to do during school, but I was kind of raised in a family where like that's kind of what you do. You go to college, then you get a business degree, then you like, kind of go into the corporate workforce, which like not at all a knock on that. Like that's a great way to make a living and to provide for a family, and like it definitely works for people, and people find their niche and like find their passion in that kind of line of work. But like ultimately I went through school, got the business degree, got into, or actually I got a marketing strategy degree because I was like in my head I was like, well, in the realm of business, like marketing is the most artsy, right?
There you go.
So wrong, like so wrong. Yeah, it's like
It sounds right.
you don't just like hop into the business world with a marketing degree and like start doing creative
Right, you're not doing graphic design, flyers.
brand design. Like, no, dude, you start in the trenches. And so that's what I did, was like got a sales job as like an SDR at a company and did that for um I kind of like worked my way up in the ranks and like became an account executive there and was like, making a good living, but it wasn't fulfilling to me. It's like wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So like a lot of
Oh,
people
Ryan.
during like the COVID time, that was when things really started picking up for me. Because up until that point, I was working in an office, and so there just wasn't much time to do much else outside of working that job and like making food and like going to bed. That was the life. Um, so like when COVID happened and everybody started working from home, and like the job was super lax and you had a lot of free time, especially when it came to sales. It's like you would have your scheduled meetings throughout the day, and then any other time in between that, it's like kind of flexible with what you could do. So yeah, during that time, I was just like kind of teaching myself different skills when it came to woodworking, like making new projects, selling things, trying to sell stuff online. And um, I don't even know what was the question. I feel like I'm just going on a tangent.
Pivoting to
No,
taking
no,
it
no,
full
that's
time.
okay.
I'm like taking you on a freaking journey of, oh, we were
That's
just
what
like
we're here.
talking about like turning it into a business, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
pivoting.
yeah. Like, when did you do it? When did you do the
Oh
switch?
yeah, yeah.
So COVID, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess all of that to say is like it was a slow ramp up of like slowly selling stuff during COVID, and then like working the sales job a couple more years and finally getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna like quit my sales job and do this full time. But for a couple years it was a business, um, like a registered LLC, and I was selling stuff online and doing commissions, but while I was, working the corporate job.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Ryan, the parallels, it's too funny. It's like if you, I don't know how many episodes I've said this in, but same, same. I literally, my family was like, we'll help you pay for college, but you have to do a business degree. And the specialty you choose has to be business school, like something. And I was like, well, marketing's like the most artistic, right? I did exactly that.
Yeah.
And then it turns out when you have a marketing degree, again, it's not like you get to be into a marketing manager anything, when you get out, you don't know anything anyways. Like, anyways, yeah, we were all young and stupid, but like you get out and it's like all I ended up with was in corporate finance, like investment finance. And I did that for 13 years. Like,
Uh,
and then I ended up quitting 2019 because I started to do the art on the side as well. Same thing. I'm like the parallels. I mean, your timing and mine is a little bit different, but like we followed very similar. And then it's like I got to that point of like it's either the art or the corporate job. Corporate job pays well, and I like it, but I like art a lot more, and it's a lot more fulfilling. So I mean, I did it as a sabbatical at first, like, okay, I might come back after a year. Nah, that was December 2019. I'm not going back, but I
there you
love that idea of like, ooh, well, marketing is the least torturous out of them. And I mean, let's be real. Now you're actually using that degree to a
Yeah.
certain extent.
I mean, you probably feel the same way where, I mean, you don't want to look back and be like, I wish I didn't do that, because I think that there is a lot of really good skills that were gained during those years of doing the corporate job. It's like, being able to sell a product, being able to sell yourself, being able to like, I don't know, have those kinds of like high level conversations with people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just like overall work ethic, it's like, especially in a sales job, all of your success is really just put on yourself. And it's like, if you don't make those calls, if you don't schedule those meetings, if you don't sell the deal, like you're not making the money. Same deal with being, a full-time artist. It's like no one's gonna go out there and sell your work for you. Like you got to be doing all of that, and you got to, like be persistent with it. So
Yeah, I think it really does. Those skills obviously do transfer. To an extent, it can be nice to quote unquote only have to wear one hat in a corporate job because obviously as creative business owners, we are the sales, we are the marketing, we are the admin doing website maintenance. We're also the ones making the pieces, deciding what future things we want to make. So it's a lot of different hats, but I love the way you reframe that of like your sales experience in corporate kind of built that foundation of, okay, well, now let me just apply this workflow to something that I actually care about, which is selling my work, which is awesome. And you kind of touched on it earlier, but I want to go back to from a style development standpoint. You mentioned starting with primarily the skateboards, doing like bottle openers and cutting boards. But you really have expanded into a whole bunch of different pieces from boxes to tables to bowls to mirrors. So I'm curious, how do you feel as though like your creativity pulls you to specific projects? Are they typically customer led? Are they just this looks cool or I think this would be cool, so I want to make it led? And like how does that kind of exploration influence the work that you're making?
yeah, I mean, I think that up until this past year, a lot of it was customer and like client led because going full time with the woodworking, it doesn't give you a lot of freedom to just make something that you want to make and see if it sells. It's like I need to be sure that this is going to sell for a certain amount so I know that I'm going to be able to pay my bills and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
if somebody's reaching out to have like a credenza built, I need to be building that no matter what the design is because that's what's going to, put food on the table. Um,
Yeah. Guaranteed money is definitely hard to give up.
Yeah, so like having a combination of like those custom pieces, but then also like the products that I was selling that I know sell, like, a combination of that was a good formula for me to like make sure I can get the bills paid every month. Um, but then, yeah, I guess in the past year, I've kind of been exploring just like the kind of stuff that I enjoy making. And that was really the reason why I went to some of these craft schools and went down that route was to just have like that time and space and like just the freedom to make what I want to make and like explore what interests me. Um, and what I found was a lot of it was more like process based of like, oh, this is like a cool process to me. Like for example, steam bending or like coopering, which coopering is if you imagine like a barrel with like the different staves
Ooh,
around it. It's
yeah.
like each stave has a different angle on it, or it has the same angle, but it's angled in a way that it can wrap around a circle. So a lot of like the flowier furniture that I'm making, all of that is coopering and like brick lamination. So a lot of those like processes really influence what I've been making recently. Um,
Hmm.
I'm definitely not somebody that has like a list of all these inspirations that I can just like rattle off, like the names of these people that inspire me. It's kind of like, I just get drawn to these different random processes and like just go down a rabbit hole with that. So,
Nice. Nice. That's a perfect way too to almost like I'm not trying to make something like a specific person. I'm more like I like what this person did with that corner, what that person did with that color, what that person did with this thing. And it's almost like we like to share the metaphor, at least I do, all the time of like art is like food. And it's like maybe in the beginning we follow recipes, like when you're learning a new technique. But then at the end of the day, it's like what makes us artists is that we can look in the pantry, we can look in the fridge, we can look at whatever and be like, okay, a little bit of this, and that booms too. Like, like we can do that after we take all these techniques and all these influences and our own experiences and kind of, make a mixture of that and kind of make our own versions of it. So I really love it. But that does lead me into the next question, which is you sell both in person at markets, you've sold on social media, you do online shop, you mentioned doing commissions. And earlier on, we discussed that you also teach skateboarding lessons, which is super awesome. Now, let's kind of let's break this down a little bit. What would you say are is some of your like income stream breakdowns? Like which one takes the cake? If we did a pie chart of sorts, right? And how has your focus on these income streams? Because you kind of noted that, yeah, sometimes you have to put aside the fun stuff to do this one's a commission that's going to pay the bills. So how has that shifted since you started this as a business?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I could answer that in two ways because in the past 2 months, when I moved back to Raleigh, I started working full time for like a local woodworking company, and so that is now a salaried gig. Of course, that's making the bulk of the income. Um, but that's different than the income I was making or like kind of the breakdown of what I was doing this past year when I was like living at these craft schools and not having overhead and just kind of like doing commissions. I don't know. I guess like what would be the most helpful to speak on like the current or like the past when I was doing the woodworking full time or when I was
I'd say woodworking full time since that's kind of like I think for obviously both are valuable, right? But I think things shift a little bit when you're doing art on the side and you have something else paying the bills versus the kind of decisions, sometimes rough decisions, you have to make about how you're spending your time and your creativity and your production time when all of it pays the bills. I think it's a little bit of a difference, but obviously if there's something like huge, yeah, you just let us know.
yeah. Um, well, I guess like maybe I'll answer it in two parts. Like I'll answer how the breakdown was when I was doing it full time, like with
Mhm.
nothing else going on. And then, because I mean, I look at myself as being a full time woodworker right now because that's what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah.
literally I'm doing the same exact kind of stuff that I was doing when I was running my own business full time, but just like in a different capacity for somebody else.
Yeah.
Still doing, client work, commission
Hmm.
stuff, like still getting to be creative in that sense, but it's not just it's not paid for by myself, it's
Yeah. The payment structure is different. The
yeah.
client acquisition process is like, oh, well, they bring the clients in and then you execute for their,
Yeah,
which is nice.
the
Yeah.
decisions are different. Would you say the biggest piece of the pie, if this helps, would be doing furniture on commission?
Yeah, for sure. So like I guess thinking about when I was doing it full time for myself, the way that each month would go is as long as I had a larger commission piece, like a coffee table, a bookcase, a record table, or whatever it was, as long as I had that, and then my online shop had products in it, and then I had like two markets, something like that, then I was super good. Um,
Hmm.
that was like kind of the breakdown that worked for me. Um, but then, some months you would get two really big commissions and then the website sales would decline a little bit or maybe I wouldn't do markets and It was like super unpredictable, which like isn't a new concept when you're trying to sell your own work. But with that being said, I would try to do a lot of like front end work so that then in the future months it would pay off, like, you know, even if it is doing a bunch of markets, that was a good way to guarantee that in a couple months I would get some more commissions, you know, because a lot of the commissions would
Hmm.
come from markets and whatever. So um yeah, I would say like for the woodworking, the larger commissions would be like, I don't know, 60% of the revenue. And then to break it down more, it's like 20% of the monthly revenue would be from online sales, and then like 10% would be from markets, and then 10% would be from like other random stuff when it came to the
Okay.
woodwork. Um, and then during that time, I was also starting and, you know, running the skateboard lesson business that I still have today. So that was another, you know, side income, which, to be honest, was way more profitable than the woodworking business could ever be. Because it's just like, you know, a time investment, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not dealing with overhead, you're not dealing with material fees, all of that. You know, it's just your time that you're investing, which like is for any of like the listeners or viewers, it's like that's another really valid revenue stream for, you know, being a professional artist in any capacity is teaching. Um,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and so that's also another thing that I'm doing here in Raleigh, or actually at the Cary Arts Center. So I've started teaching on Saturdays, just like a beginner woodworking class, um,
Perfect.
and it's great. It's like, you know, that's another just like guaranteed chunk of money, and you're also able to connect with your community more, and you're able to just like share your craft. And sometimes when you're actually, like, all the time in my experience when I'm teaching, I get like, you know, I learn just as much from teaching as the students do, because like speaking through your workflow or speaking through your process, you kind of figure out, you know, like what you do or what you should do better, or, you know, just like things you might run into. So um, yeah, teaching's also just been like a really good just revenue source for me over the past like year or two.
Hmm.
Nice.
I love that. And I love what you mentioned too about even when you're doing the percentage breakdowns of acknowledging that a lot of your commissions would come from markets.
Hmm.
So, like, even if technically looking at the numbers, maybe markets are only 10% of your sales, some people may see that and be like, oh, well, are markets quote unquote worth it? But understanding that kind of from a larger business sales relationship sense that oftentimes people meeting you at a market and then following you on Instagram and following along with your online content is what will lead to a commission 6 months from now, right? And front ending some of those markets to build that financial cushion so you don't have to do a market 6 months from now when you can do that commission. And even from a teaching standpoint, I imagine that probably has happened or will happen in the future where someone takes one of your classes and then either right after the class or a few months after they like end up wanting to have one of your pieces because they remember that experience with you and whether they built a piece or they want something more extravagant that you built. It's all about those relationships and networking with a potential future student, a potential future customer, a commissioner, that they all play a role in that, which is really hard to quantify as a business owner. And you just kind of have to keep putting your hand in as many pots as you can because you don't know what will become an opportunity 6 months from now. But that's like the only thing we have control of.
Yeah, that's a super good point. And like, it's hard to quantify that, and I think that that's something that um is like, it's a tough pill to swallow, is some of that stuff you're not gonna see a return on, and you're not gonna know when it's gonna give a return. and like, I just think that putting more value, especially as a full-time artist, and it's different if you're doing like 2D stuff or like you've got prints or stuff that's easily shipped, but like at least for me, when I'm, if I'm making, or my goal is to make furniture, larger scale woodworking pieces, it's like my radius of people I'm selling to is pretty small. It's very community centric, and so like, it's hard to see those metrics when it comes to just the relationships that you build. Um, and it's super valuable to, even if you're not making money off of those markets, to still put that energy in and still like show face, because that's what people ultimately want, is like to have that connection to the artist.
Mhm.
I mean, when it comes to anything, it's like the majority of folks that have bought, especially bigger pieces, it's like they know me personally because they met me in a place or whatever, and like, they can connect that face to the work. And yeah, I think that's super valuable to put some emphasis on.
Yeah, and I love the way that you, I mean, share your pieces and your process on social media too, which I feel like is a whole other conversation that we could have.
Yeah.
But while we have you here, I do want to talk about your experience with art residencies that we kind of touched on earlier. Because when we first met, you were mainly doing markets, and I was like seeing you hustling around town, and then it was like, which different residency is he at this week? I don't know. Like you're like all over the place. So I'm curious, like which residencies did you do? Like how long was each one? And like was there a specific focus that you had for each of those? Like what was your experience like doing them?
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna be a long answer.
Yeah.
Um, I guess like to start with just like finding the residencies and the craft schools, like I always thought that, becoming a full-time woodworker, business owner, like the path was you acquire all these tools, you get a workshop space, and then you just like work in your space alone, like in perpetuity, and you
Yeah.
just make things. And like that's what it is. And getting into that, it was super lonely and just like, restrictive, because you're trying to make this stuff, but you're like just alone in your garage, and you're just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know who to ask. I'm like, there was something lacking, and like at that point, I didn't know really what it was, but I knew a couple of friends in the area who had done programs at Penland and um, like some other various craft schools, and have always like talked about it or posted about it, but I never really thought much of it. I think that there's just like the connotation with craft schools can be like super varied, just like based on the person you speak with. Some people see craft schools as like this woo woo, like, you're going to do arts and crafts and like, sit in drum circles and, whatever, which, yes, there's some of that, but like, there's,
Just
there's
sitting
like,
on the mountaintop and
yeah,
staring.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like there's a large spectrum of like what craft schools are and what it means. So just like exploring that more and figuring out what it really was that I'm signing up for.
Mhm.
But anywho, so I decided to go to Penland, and that was the first craft school that I went to, and I did a 2 month concentration there where, um, you stay on the campus or like the property. For what I did, there was a small work trade aspect to it, so that reduced the tuition by quite a bit, in terms of like a scholarship that they offer. And so you're there for 2 months, and you're learning in the wood shop. You're with a group of people that are kind of in the same position as you, and that are really excited to get in there and either like learn the craft as a whole, or like focus on certain aspects of the craft, like, or just are there for community. And all of those reasons are super valid. And yeah, so being there was just and a lot of people will have the same kind of sentiment, but like it was super transformative to just be around other people in the same boat, feeling like I'm supported, feeling like I had, people to talk to that I was like, on the same page with. They could speak the language. It was like it was super amazing. And so after, being there for a month or so, I was like, I just want to keep doing this. Like whatever this is, like I want to figure out how to do this and like be in this bubble for longer. And kind of like put that energy out there and like started asking around to people like what do I do? Like where do I go? Because there's all these other craft schools that just like people don't know about. Tons in North Carolina, tons across the East Coast. Like it's kind of crazy that it's they're all out there, and they just you just got to find them. But anyway, so I was wanting to stay in this world, and while I was at Penland, the studio coordinator there was like, you should apply to Pocosin, which is another one that's over towards the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Mhm.
She's like, they're looking for a studio coordinator, and you should check it out. And so I applied, but didn't get that job. But then the director got back to me and was like, hey, so we're not going to give you that role, but like we got this other role that's called a fellowship, where instead of like being the studio coordinator, where you're doing all the work, like the maintenance on the machines, and like it's kind of like a day job, instead of that, you would be the studio fellow, which I would get to take every single class for 3 months. So every week they had another like a new class that I got to take.
That is so cool.
Take all the classes, participate in like shorter term residencies at the beginning, at the front end and the back end of those 3 months. And then also there would be, like a work trade situation where I'd be managing or like kind of getting up to speed all the work study folks that would come in to help out with meals every week.
Nice.
And so that was like even more of a transformative experience. I mean, imagine like every single week you're getting to learn like this crazy new concept that you haven't ever like tried to tackle yourself, but you're also learning it from like your YouTube heroes, like I got to handpick all these people that I got to take classes from, and some of them were people that like I was watching on YouTube since the beginning of my woodworking career, and it was just like incredible to now be on like a friend level with them. I can like
Nice.
message my heroes anytime, and like that's super special. So that was my time at Pocosin. Before going there, I was living in Chapel Hill, and I was gonna be leaving that house that I was at where my shop was, and like it was a really big place, and I was like, I guess I'll just put it all into storage and then like figure it out. And so that's what I did, is like put everything into like a storage unit, and like moved my whole shop into a friend's garage, and um,
Nice.
just kind of like was able to move to these craft schools where they, for a lot of situations, when there's the work trade aspect, or if you're there for residency, it's varied, but for the most part, they'll cover like your housing, your meals, or sometimes a mix of that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, just like having that time and space to be able to make what I wanted to make while not having to worry about like overhead or rent or things like that was super valuable. And so that kind of got me to the end of the summer being at Pocosin. And then during that time, I was applying for other future residencies. And, with like the kind of residency situation, you don't necessarily like there's no guarantees that you're going to get any of this. You don't find out until maybe like it could be like 2 weeks before the residency or like 2 months before the residency, but regardless, you're kind of like at the mercy of their timeline. And so during the summer, I was applying to other things, like getting accepted to things, getting rejected by a lot of things, and just trying to figure it out. And so I got accepted into one in New Jersey that was for November, but I didn't really know what to do between the end of the summer and November. And so I pretty much just like begged Pocosin to let me stay for another couple months. And like,
You
dude,
love
Nice.
me, right? I'll be great. I won't
yeah,
bother.
it's like, dude, come
I'll
on, you
fix
barely go to
everything.
school.
One at a
Yes,
time, it's just a construct. It's fine.
yeah, but, yeah. So just like, I still had to do a full residency proposal and like kind of pitch them on why they should let me stay.
Yeah.
Um, and like that, included with that was work trade, doing shop upkeep, maintenance, making fixtures around the craft school, things of that nature. But
Mhm.
yeah, so stayed there another couple months, and then that got me to November when I went to a residency in New Jersey. That was at Peters Valley. I feel like it's confusing because they all just start with a P. But
Penland, Poquoson, Peter Valley. Got it.
yeah, and so did that one, and that one was super unique. It was like in the middle of nowhere on the border of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And normally with these craft school situations, there's like a big cohort of people, and you're like there's like a social element to it, right? But with this one, it
Yeah.
was like three people on this massive property, and like each
Oh,
was in their own workshop. So I was just like alone in the wood shop for a month, and it was amazing. Like it was great to have that space, but it was definitely like you kind of find yourself talking to the walls every once in a while, and like
You're like, I'm here with people, but also not really with people.
yeah, yeah.
talking to the trees.
Yeah, but all that to say, like they all have their own like pros and cons and different kind of like um I don't know, like just different kind of vibe around the whole residency and like different compensations or like sometimes you have meals, sometimes you have housing, and sometimes you don't, and like so all of them are very different. It's just kind of like a matter of finding what works best for you.
Yeah, I love that. I've only done Penland, and it was last winter. And literally coming out of it, I mean, we probably have a podcast episode where I was just gushing, going Penland's magic. It's just freaking magic.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to go back. I'm like, oh, putting it back on the calendar. Thank you, Ryan, for the reminder.
Did
I'm
you
like, oh, but also
was
look
it
Pocosin. That one
was it
sounds
their
fun
winter
too.
residency?
hmm
What was that?
Was it their winter residency?
Yeah, and I did ceramics on it. It was it was really freaking cool. And I got to meet some of my heroes already, some of which are professors in like the cohort I did was before college started, so a lot of the residents were professors of ceramics in different universities. And I mean, the knowledge dripping from these people was just chef's kiss. It was just like, how do I do? And they're like, oh, honey, like, hold on. If you do this and this and that, I'm like, oh, it was cool. It was cool, but still being self-directed instead of being like an actual workshop type setting. So it was very interesting. It was cold as heck, but I'd do it again. I would just go, when the weather's nicer. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, being there in the springtime was like incredible because you did get like a little taste of the winter, but then it started getting warmer and you could hop in the river.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yep, definitely putting it back on the list. But I do have a question for you, Ryan. So, what impact do you think residencies have had, one, on your business, if any, two, creative development, and three, network?
Hmm. So I guess I'll start with the business. And I mean, I feel like I look at like when we say business, I feel like I look at that differently than like me owning my business and like how my business is running. It's more so like, am I like being able to provide for myself by woodworking, Like that's
Mm-hmm.
like woodworking in general is like my business, not necessarily like dusted woodworking, but just like, am I able to make stuff and like provide for myself? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think in that sense, it was like, I mean, it allowed me to make the work that I want to make, which then was what drew like my future employer's attention to me it was like one of the things that got me the current job that I have now because they needed somebody to do more custom things that were like more float, like more, I guess, kind of like organic shaped or like whatever, like just things that were outside of the realm of like square cabinet boxes. And so, yeah, it's like one of those things where if I didn't have that space to make the pieces that I felt passionate about and like put those out into the world, then the future opportunities wouldn't have come for the business. Um, I think that like creatively, it was insane. Like just to your point, around all of these people that are just like gushing with knowledge and just experience or like different ideas. I think that that was like super impactful to just like have people to talk through ideas with and like have people that had experience in different realms. Like there was this one person in my woodworking class who is like really good at more like sculptural power carving stuff, and then there was somebody that had never done woodworking before but they were a ceramicist, and so like that translated into their work, and it's like
Nice.
you know, getting some inspiration outside of just the realm of like your hardcore like traditional woodworker was super valuable to kind of take with me into the future pieces. Um, so that was incredible, just like from a creative aspect. Um, and then networking, I mean, I already kind of touched on that a little bit as far as like just the ability to meet so many people and feel so much more connected to like just the maker world as a whole, instead of just being a hermit in my garage and like you know talking to my mom every other week or whatever. It's like I felt like I had a more meaningful like social uh I had more meaningful social connections and like both in a professional and just like personal way. I met some of my best friends now at these craft schools, but then I also met some of like the instructors who I've looked up to for so many years at these craft schools that now I have on like a
On a
I
more personal level.
yeah, more personal level. So yeah, I think like yeah, all of the above just like leveled up going to these craft schools.
That's exactly where I was about to go. Not just because our podcast is called that, but I'm like, it
Oh,
sounds like
wait, I
on
didn't know
all
it was called
levels,
that. That's
it
crazy.
literally just helped you, pump up
Yeah.
your skills, all of it. It's like check, check, check. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, art residencies. Yep, love them.
Yeah, you're definitely getting my wheels turning of like, I need to start looking into some of these because that sounds amazing.
Mhm.
Now, real quick before we head into our commercial break, what advice would you give an artist who is considering applying for an art residency, but maybe is kind of on the fence or not sure where to start?
Hmm. Well, I think that the best place to start would be to figure out like what amount of time you can put towards this residency.
Mm.
Because there are so many out there that vary a lot. You could get a week residency, 2 weeks. You could go all the way up to like, a couple years, which like if you're in that position to do like a year-long residency someplace, like totally you should do it. But I think figuring out like what kind of time you can commit to it is the first step. And then um, whether it's like if it's a class, look for some of your heroes. Like who do you look up to? Are they teaching a class someplace? Start down that path. But look at the local craft schools, especially. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably like East Coast or in North Carolina. Like there's so many good ones in this general area. So
Hmm.
look at that. They have all of their classes online, and then they also have all of their residencies posted. And if you don't see them, email them because 9 times out of 10, the person like 9 times out of 10, there's only like one person that's handling the bulk of these like residency applications or like the communication. So, the best thing to do is just put your name out there, like get in front of somebody, even if you can't find what you're looking for, be like, hey, I want to do this in this capacity at your space. Like, is that possible? And a lot of these craft schools will be super open to just either like talking through with you or, like figuring out a situation outside of what you would see listed on their website. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think just like figuring out the time frame you're looking for and then like what you're hoping to get out of it. If you have a certain project in mind, or if you just want to like be in a new place for a year, that's also super valid. Like, both will unlock some kind of creativity for you.
Yeah, I think I would add to that budget. Because not all artist residencies are paid.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to pay to do the artist residency. So I think that's another element to think about. It's like if you have to travel to the place, if they don't include food, for example, or there's some kind of payment you have to do, because some of them do allow exchanges, but some of them don't. Some of them expect cash, essentially. And you are still getting value out of it. It's just a different type of trade, but there are websites for those of you that are like, I don't even know where to start at all. There's websites like RES Artists, without the T at the end. It's RESARTIS.org, and we can put that in the links for the episode, that show artist residencies all over the world, literally. And you can like go through the filters to see which ones pay versus which ones you have to pay, and you can put length of time and if I'm not mistaken, a nonprofit runs this. So, anyways, it's a good place to at least peruse, if you will. If anybody's kind of like, I don't even know where. So, you can also, of course, ask your local arts council where you live, and chances are they know what's in your area. So that's
Mhm.
another way to start. But next up, we love to ask all our guests how they define success. But first, we're going to put a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist resources.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there, but what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold so that you don't have to waste time going down those endless rabbit holes.
We created a library of PDF resources with bonus videos that cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, and artist mindset, several templates, and more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartist.com/shop to level up your creative career today.
Welcome back, everybody. So, Ryan, how do you define success as an artist?
Mm, should have been thinking about this one while we were taking a break. I mean, personally, for me, it's just being able, and I kind of talked about it before, but like to be able to provide for myself doing my passion full time, I think that's really how I define success. Um, doesn't mean that I'm making a bunch of money, but like it means I'm making enough to live and like just enjoy my life. I think that's like the main thing when I'm trying to, do woodworking full time.
Mhm. I love that.
Nice.
It's all many of us could ask for, and it's amazing. So now, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
Mm. You don't have to do it all by yourself, and you don't have to buy every freaking tool yourself. I think that, and like this probably applies for a lot of different like kind of craft or art mediums out there. Is there's group shop spaces, there's community centers, there's weekly meetup groups that you can get involved with. Like you don't have to be a little garage hermit and like spend your savings on all these tools that are just collecting dust. You can slowly, learn how to use this stuff or like, use other people's equipment in community shop spaces, or like just get involved with other people in your area that are are woodworkers. Try to find a mentor that way. I think that that's all things I would have told myself at the beginning, that could have been helpful. But you know what? I don't regret any of it. Now I have these tools.
Every tool is worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect. And isn't there a shop space near Capitol Boulevard, outskirts of downtown, where they have like shared, could have sworn it was called shop space or something
Yeah, yeah,
similar.
yeah. They do. I don't know. I don't know if they have a wood shop. It's either
Yeah.
they're working on,
Mm.
or it's
Or
like
metalworking maybe.
small. Yeah, I've heard about that one. They've got a community shop in Durham, called Both
Yeah.
Works. That one's apparently super nice. Still have yet to visit that one. And then of course, like the Cary Art Center, they've got
Mm.
a wood
Mhm.
shop. That's the spot I'm teaching at, and you can take their intro class and then get access to the shop during their open studio times. So yeah, finding a situation like that, because then also when you're in one of those open studios, more than likely you're going to be around like either professionals or people who have done it a lot longer than you. So just like access to information is a lot easier instead of yeah trying to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you go off to other residencies. You don't have to pay for storage for all of your woodworking equipment.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, Ryan, if somebody randomly hands you $100, what would you splurge on or invest in? It has to be something that brings you joy and relates to your art or business.
Hmm. That's like such a like a I don't know. I feel like either needs to be like $20 or like $1,000. It's like a
It's
hundred.
almost like we made it that amount on purpose. It's like just
Yeah.
Yeah,
like splurge, but not too much to be like out of the realm
yeah,
of
it's
possibility.
just enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe some dyes, some pigments, some varnish.
Mm, I'm drawing a blank. Actually, no. There's like this one hand plane that I've really been wanting, but like it's pretty impractical for what I actually do on a day to day. But it'd probably just be a nice hand plane. So yes, I
Okay.
would be cool.
So
Okay. Perfectly valid.
love it. Well, Ryan, thank you so, so much for being on the podcast today, for being so generous with the information you shared about your journey. But real quick, before we let you go with the rest of your day, how can our listeners stay in touch with you after they listen to today's episode?
Mm, Probably my Instagram is the best way to keep up with like what I'm up to, and that has like links to my website and whatnot. So that's just Dusted Woodworking. Um, but also you can reach out to my website if you don't have that.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to link those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being with us on the podcast today.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Well, in the meantime, for our listeners, if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at May Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artist on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.